Work is just a very small part of your life. And every day you spend obsessively focusing on it and ignoring the rest of your life, you never get that day back.
Hi, I am Sophie Vaux, and this is the Rise and Play podcast. In the show, I sit down with influential thought leaders of the gaming industry to deconstruct how they create the best team and company cultures in order to create the best games. Every episode brings actionable insight to improve your leadership, self-awareness, and emotional management skills. Because becoming a better leader starts with becoming a better human. So, are you ready to unlock your full potential in life and business? Let's begin. Don't just see the future, know the future with today's sponsor, Source10. I've talked before about how Source10 is a necessary tool to compete in gaming these days. In short, Source10 empowers studios to build human-centric experiences by unlocking deep, psychological understanding of your most valuable audiences. At a time when we needed to know what our players would respond to, my team and I use Source10 and their product Navigator to identify key psychological insights across our audience for Plantopia. This prompted us to reshape our F2E, for example, promoting a stronger sense of productivity earlier on in the game. And this aligned with our audience's desire for empowerment and accomplishment, resulting in higher F2E completion rates and longer sessions. Source10 Player Intelligence Platform enables studios to unlock the full potential of their games and minimize risks across every stage of the development cycle. Visit go.source10.io that you can find in the show notes for a demo. Mention Rise and Play and receive a free feature, theme, and art style study included with your Navigator purchase, a $20,000 value. Learn why EA, Supercell, Wooga, and more use Source10 to create the best human-centric gaming experiences possible. Good morning, everyone. I say good morning because it's my morning, and it's also for Ethan Levy that I have here a very early morning.
Very early.
On the West Coast. And I'm very excited about that episode because it's two active podcaster, and Ethan has been a really active, especially since last year on Deconstructor of Fun, handling all the podcasts, also with the departure of Mishka. But then as we were discussing about topics and trying to overlap some topic between Deconstructor of Fun and Rise and Play, very interesting. We got in the conversation with Ethan about, especially with focus on Rise and Play, like leadership, self-management, reflection thoughts as yourself as an executive in games, Ethan's own journey in games, and an very interesting topic for me, which I'm very curious to ask about today, is the myth of Silicon Valley and the entrepreneur myth, like working hard, hustling, that I've seen a lot, of course, from people from San Francisco. And I see, of course, the hype and the result from the outside. It's like, oh, it looks good, a lot of gratification, recognition publicly. But I wonder what's happening really inside for people who are going through that experience. And I really appreciate it from you, Ethan, coming to me and discussing this openly and being even open to participate to the podcast today to share your own journey, like as a Silicon Valley executive and now building your own company. And before we get into the question and a bit the journey, your journey in games, please, could you introduce yourself? Maybe you don't need introduction for people from Deconstructor of Fun, but it doesn't harm to introduce yourself again and what you've been doing in games.
Sure, happy to. So first, welcome. Thank you for having me on the podcast. I just said welcome because I'm not used to being on this side of the mic. Normally, I'm the one asking the questions, so I'm a little bit nervous today. So just a little bit about me. I've been designing and producing games for 20 years. I've contributed to over 80 shipped titles. I started in QA on Star Wars Battlefront while I was in college. Actually, I spent 2 years working at Pandemic Studios while I was in college on that game. My career highlights are probably at EA. I was the producer on Dragon Age Legends, so that was a free-to-play Facebook game based in the Dragon Age IP. I spent 3 years as a monetization consultant, and that's where a lot of people know me from, is the talks I gave. The talk that seems to have the most legs is called The Tower of Want. A lot of people bring that up when they meet me. I worked on a lot of games then. The highlights were Call of Duty, NBA 2K, Guitar Hero, and then on mobile, Family Guy, The Quest for Stuff, which was the number one grossing game. I played a small role in that as a monetization consultant, and similarly for War Dragons, which was a big hit at the time. And then just a lot of other stuff. Roller Coaster Tycoon, you'd know. I worked on MOBAs, on Match 3, on every life sim, every single genre. And then I spent a lot of years, almost 8 years at N3twork, where again, I gave a lot of public lectures about Legendary Game of Heroes. So I'm kind of known for that. I was on an incredible team at N3twork. I was the lead designer of that game. And, the publicly available figure is it did over 250 million in revenue. That was back in 2019. It's still live today. So I was also the executive producer of Tetris, where we launched 5 different Tetris SKUs, did millions of downloads with those various games, and had a #1 Apple Arcade game with Tetris Beat, which was a very fun project. And for the past year, I've been in entrepreneur in residence mode with a VC firm called Connect Ventures. And then, of course, you might know me as the guy who shouts at Eric Kress on a weekly basis on Deconstructor Of Fun, where I've taken over the podcast publishing and I host and Twig, and I host my own interview show.
Starting with the start, actually, how you got into games, because you started really early and young, straight into games. And I wonder, how does that fit in the big picture of your drive for career growth? I don't know if at that time, I think we are about the same age, games were a big thing, recognized, and it was like a career path. So what led you there, and how did that turn into like your career, going for the next big thing each time, step by step?
Sure. So I knew probably from age 10 that video games, and specifically designing video games, was what I wanted to do. And I was warned off from it and discouraged from it many times, actually. Both my parents are lawyers. My older brother is a lawyer. And I look at that, and that probably has a big part to do with what I would call my like maniacal drive to be a success in the video games industry, to be known within my niche. I mean, I would be lying to myself if I didn't say I want to be one of the best game designers in the world. Like, that's a thing that I want, rational or not. I chose the college I went to, which was a USC, before it was the #1 video game industry school in the US. I got very lucky that I had a cousin who was in LA. He was in film. So he was a big inspiration for me just to even pursue it. But he had a friend, Giz Gewurtz, who was the director of, at the time, I think it was Star Wars: The Clone Wars. They weren't on Battlefront yet. And so I met Giz over lunch with my cousin Eric and talked about video games and got his email. And I basically harassed him on email until he agreed to give me an internship. And then I changed my major to something that I knew I could ace all my classes only going to school 2 days a week, which was communications. That ended up being actually a really great major for me. But I did that so that I could go to the studio 3 days a week. And during the summers, during spring break, I was there every day. And I was just desperate. Like, I'm here. I've got my claws into the games industry and I can't let go. Everything I tried to prove that I was ready for it, or to impress the lead designer or the design team, backfired. I reflect on those memories kind of frequently, too frequently probably, and just think like, why didn't they spot my potential? Like, everybody, it seemed like it felt like everything I did, I was kind of met with like, you're here as a favor, shut up, just do your little QA job and get out of the way. You're not a game designer. The game had no tutorial and no single player, really. It was multiplayer only. And so like one weekend I got really excited and wrote up a design pitch for like a tutorial. And I sent it to the game director. And instead of the response being like, oh, Ethan's really eager, let's give him the tool set, let him play around and just see what happens. Somebody sat me down in a conference room and was like, you must think you're a big fish over at USC. Well, let me tell you, a big fish in a small pond isn't so big when they get to the big pond. He literally told me like, you're not any good, get the fuck out. Like, shut the fuck up, go do QA, you're here as a favor. Everything but words. That was the message. And when that game, after it went gold between Battlefront 1 and Battlefront 2, which was months before I graduated, they laid me off. First I feel like I was trying to prove myself to my parents, right? Like, I can be a game designer. And then I was trying to prove myself to those people, and still am. Like, you guys made a fucking mistake when you didn't recognize how good I was at this. So yeah, just a really healthy emotional place to be basing one's career and personality off of. But it's where the drive comes from.
Because at the end of the day, like 10 years, 20 years forward, you have had your career. So from that point where everyone was kind of against you and no one believed in you, to say, what was the resource you had still to find and go forward? And today, do you feel like you are worthy, or is it still something you try to prove?
Oh no, I'm still trying to prove it. If you look at my career and think I've made it, I don't feel that way yet. My last rejection for a job I thought I was perfect for is less than a year ago.
Mm-hmm. That bar of success for you, I wonder, like when you were aiming to be the best designer in games.
Don't use the past tense there. Still am.
Yes. What does it look like for you? I'm really curious. Does that concrete target, or was never concrete, has changed over time? Like a moving target, because best, is very subjective. And what are we talking about here?
Mm-hmm.
Whole game industry, mobile game industry, free to play industry. It's like.
Do you want to know how sick I am? My honest answer would be being mentioned in the same sentence as Ken Levine, Genova Chen, Greg Kasavin, Cliff Bleszinski, Will Wright. Like, as irrational it is, because yes, I've got a long career ahead of me still, but I don't think I'm on the trajectory to get there, just by the nature of what I do. And Greg Kasavin, that guy can write, that guy can make games, and of course, he has amazing partners and has built an amazing company around him. Now I'm mature enough to know, it's not just the one person that maybe gives the interview, or the one or two people who gives the interview. So yeah, it's a really high bar, and I would say even an unnecessary or unhealthy one.
I look at also the actions and decisions you've taken. Indeed, the companies you join, what you learn, also building your own company, are not necessarily matching that goal of being the best, designer. And what does it mean to you to be recognized among the best game designers along with those names? Because there must be something to it that is true, but maybe the way to get there might not be the only way, right? So I'm curious to just understand you here.
What does it mean? I think it means to have played a key leadership role in the creative side of a game that's recognized as one of the best or impactful in the year it came out. Being recognized by players, being recognized by journalists, being recognized by peers in the industry. Marvel Snap and Ben Brode is a really good example right now. I look at that game and I go, Marvel Snap's better than anything I've done, and it's better than anything I will do. Just in pure game design, pure fun factor, that's an amazing game. I see all the craft that took that team 4.5 years to get to launch. I'm in awe of it. The industry's in awe of it. Players love it. I look at how great it is, and I look at all the acclaim that the team and Ben Brode are getting, and I'm jealous. That is the type of success that I am jealous of and chasing. I'll be totally honest, right? Because nobody who played, even the players who played Legendary 8 hours a day, 7 days a week, they didn't feel that way about the game. They didn't love it. It didn't. I mean, I did player surveys. Like, some of the best ones I got back was like, or one I still remember that was very touching was like, hey, I'm a recovering alcoholic, and having this game helps keep me sober. This was one of the top guild leaders in the game. They had basically replaced alcohol and their alcoholic friends with Legendary and their guildmates. And like that was amazing. And thinking about that still makes me feel pretty good. But a lot of players, our most devoted players, had a love-hate relationship with that game. And, didn't get a lot of Tetris fan mail, for example, There's something in me that wants to make something that people just love so dearly that it becomes a cornerstone part of their life, the way that many games have been for me.
And I hear as well a strong desire as well to help and make things evolve, right? And it's not different from many other motivation of people who are in any industry of passion in games. And this is going back to the maybe pure motivation behind it. And maybe when we talk or think of a healthy part, it's more the extrinsic reward, but the intrinsic motivation I hear as well through those words, which I would say rationally you have achieved in different ways, of course, in terms of impact and in terms of recognition. And something I have used as well a lot in coaching for myself, I learned the power or the burden of our inner speech or narrative, because our world, our perception of the world is full of narrative and story, and we write the story of our own lives. And it's interesting, I see a different narrative for you from where I'm sitting and from just this conversation, but I can see your own narrative to yourself with the same facts, So how does that land on you, like that kind of self-narrative that you're having?
100%. That lands. I've made many attempts to change my self-narrative and my self-speech and had some successes and a lot of failures. It's really hard, no matter how many audiobooks you listen to or how many therapy sessions you go to.
I know about that.
that inner wiring is, it's almost like, hey, remember that 10-year-old kid with all those dreams? Like, what if he was an asshole? Like, couldn't you just if you could just let go of that part of yourself and recognize all you have, you'd probably be pretty happy. But that's an easy thing to write down in a journal and a really hard thing to execute.
When I look at people who have recognized success, there's a driver that is there for a reason, and you have your own. I have as well my high performer driver. I have talked about it in other episodes, and it has helped us to do what we are doing, the impact we have given. But it's an endless race, as you know. And I can recognize as well how hard it is to change that narrative, because it's not just cognitively thinking about it like, oh yeah, I'm going to get rid of that part like a puzzle and then I'm a new person tomorrow.
Right.
So it's a constant, not even fight, but reminder. It's a balance. It's a journey. Like just you as well today on this podcast, having the awareness of it, talking about it, and like owning kind of the struggles. Like it's a balancing act, like for the rest of your life. I think as well, this is the reality of most of us, right? And how it turns out in what we are doing and questioning all the time our priorities, the right decision. And that's where maybe I want to spend the last part of the conversation for today. You seem to be in a point of life from our conversation, even before the episode today, in a lot of reflection where you were saying like you are reaching your 40. I don't know if you are already 40.
I just turned 40 a couple weeks ago.
Congratulations. I actually read somewhere, it is a thing. It's not a midlife crisis, but it is like, oh, okay, I'm getting old. I'm reflecting on my life, my choice. Do I want to use the same formula as the past 30 years when I was conscious for the next 30 years? And you are at this point, and based on what we discussed today, what are the reflections for yourself and maybe things you are thinking to rewiring, and maybe even advice for people who are in this race of performance, the things you've learned and maybe you'd like to share?
I mean, obviously, cis white father of many small children has a midlife crisis at the age 40 is such a trope, such a cliche, it's almost painful. But, people who listen to the podcast know that, we just had our fourth and final child a couple months ago. So like, I've got a big family. I've got a startup and a hobby as a Deconstructor of Fun that takes a lot of time. Mm-hmm. Something happened to me recently where I mentor a number of people, younger game developers. It ends up being mostly women because they ask for help the most, is what I've found.
That's great. I'm very happy to hear that.
And I do it because I live in South Carolina and I don't have anybody around me who works in video games. I've got two people. And so, when they ask for help and they seem to have good intentions and they remind me of my younger self, I'm happy to give it. And I was talking at GDC to a very young founder, more successful than I am, raised money, has a sizable team working for her. As I started to ask her questions, it felt like the best advice I could give her wasn't about product, but was about her life, because I was having all these flashbacks of myself at 19, skipping spring break, not doing anything in the summer, spending every hour that I could at Pandemic Studios. And I just asked her, like, are you making any time for yourself? And she said, well, sometimes I take Saturdays off. I'm trying to force myself to take every Saturday night off. I was like, look, you're 25 right now. You're only ever going to be 25 once. Your career cannot be your whole life, right? Like, actually, the source of my biggest regrets aren't that I haven't made a game as good as Journey or Marvel Snap or Bastion, but really it's about all the trips I never went on, the spring break trip I never went on, how I never lived abroad, the dates I didn't go on, or the relationships I ruined because I was too busy working, or the times I was so distracted with work I wasn't there for my children, or I was angry at them unnecessarily. Your life is so much bigger than your career. And every day, it's the only time you get that day in that age, that body, that energy. Mm-hmm. And I was like, you gotta, are there things that your friends are doing that you resent? And she's like, oh yeah, they went on this trip and I didn't go. They did this and whatever it was. And I'm like, please, for my sake, because I can't do those things anymore, right? I have 4 children. I cannot leave them for a week to go to Coachella and do drugs and listen to my favorite DJs. Like, I can't do that. My family needs me. Maybe when they're all in high school, I'll be able to do that again. And then I'll be the weird old guy having horrible dehydration in the desert, like dancing to past his prime Deadmau5. Who knows? But like, I basically, was telling her, like, please live your life, live a life. Don't give it all to this career, because, I bought into this myth. You listen to all the Stanford GSB startup podcasts and you read blitz scaling and the cold start problem and 0 to 1 and the hard thing about hard things. And you read Joachim's newsletter and like, I mean, I can tell you do all these things, right? You ingest all this media and you're like, I am going to do it. I am going to be the best. I am going to be an amazing founder. And my book is going to be so much better than the Zappos guy's book. Right. And it's just like, you can ruin your whole life. You can miss your whole life chasing that success. And that was I was saying it to her as much as I was saying it to myself, because I try and set very hard boundaries, and I have for years, actually, to make sure I'm spending a lot of time with my family, that I'm not missing my children's childhood for the sake of network or for the sake of my own startup or the sake of Deconstructor Of Fun. And that involves a lot of sacrifice. I mean, it's 5 a.m. for me here in Charleston, and I'm podcasting in the garage so that I don't wake anybody up, right? Like I woke up this early because that's how much I wanted to have this conversation with you. But I was saying to her and saying to myself as well, as, kind of that rewiring, constant reminder that work is just a very small part of your life. And every day you spend obsessively focusing on it and ignoring the rest of your life, you never get that day back.
That's a lot of wisdom. I'm really grateful and happy that this is a kind of conversation you're having with a younger generation. It's like, please don't burn yourself like we did. It's like,
go on sloppy dates and make mistakes, please. Like, and then tell me about them, because I'm this old father now and like I miss the drama. But
and I hope that if they do listen, what's the reaction or the instinct is like, yeah, well,
I haven't followed up with her specifically in a bit, so I probably will after this, and I hope she is, and I hope that some other people. There's another young woman who I mentor, and I asked a very similar question, and she was like, "Yep, I'm going on this trip to Portugal, and I just went to Coachella." She sent me photos of
Oh,
her
that's
and her
great.
boyfriend, and I was like, "God bless you," but
Oh, that's very cute.
if she fully embraces it, she's probably doing better than me, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And my last question today, I'm curious because having a startup and 4 kids, my God, it's like I don't have any children yet, but I like it's
It's a
probably a
lot.
full
I mean,
time
I love them
to do.
dearly, but it is a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. So how are you approaching your life now, having a startup, your big family, with this reprioritization that you just talked about? How does that look now compared to the past? Like, what are you setting as boundaries, like you said, to make it work?
Right. Well, it's worth recognizing I'm in very early stages with my own startup. So a lot of what I'll say is more about ambition, the ambition for the company I'm trying to build. But I do want to, for instance, I do school pickup for my 7-year-old daughter a couple days a week. And that is not something I plan on giving up. Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's important to me. And if my team is 12 or my team is 20 or my team is 200, I hope to still be in that school pickup line and still be taking phone calls in that hour where I'm like waiting in it doesn't have to be an hour, but like I get there at 2 and I can take a call in the car and be productive.
Mm-hmm.
And I would be perfectly happy to model that behavior for my employees and coworkers, because it's the same way I would want them to treat their lives in terms of I'm, trying to build a culture of remote work and of trust and of you're a mature adult and we trust you to get your work done. And we're not going to watch you because we literally can't.
Mm-hmm.
You're in your home, I'm in mine. If you need to take your cat to the vet, right? If you need to take your kid to school, if you need a mental health day, like these things are all not just acceptable behaviors, not like, well, I guess he took a mental health day, but encouraged, right? We want to encourage these behaviors from high performers and trust that they get their work done and help them get their work done. And if they don't have that high output, somebody who's taking advantage of the company, it'll be a company more like a sports team than a family, right? Like you have to have the high performance. Your colleagues have to have the trust that you are going to do what you commit to, but how you do it and when you do it, as long as you're there when your teammates need you, isn't our concern. So I live my life a certain way, and I'm trying to build a company that allows people to do the same. Because I think that kind of in this post-COVID remote work world, that's where we are. And the types of things we're trying to do on the schedules we're trying to do them, I believe can be achieved if somebody needs to take an hour off during the day to go do school pickup.
Mm. And that's, I think, the best example of how you impact not only your life by actions, like you seem to have clarity on your commitments, what is important, what you will not negotiate, out of to have work like creep in your personal life, and leading by example. That's the best way to influence and support others to have more balance. You give permission by you doing it because you are the main founder or CEO, that's the best way to also support others. So I encourage this for also entrepreneurs who are rebalancing their lives and building that culture is by doing it and showing that you're doing it, like even putting in the calendar your times where what you're doing, right? That's also a very modern way to do it. Well, Ethan, thanks a lot for all this wisdom, open conversation. And your trust, because I did ask some tricky question and I don't know how you would be open for that. So I enjoyed a lot of the conversation, and I can tell you in what you share, we have quite some in common, and I have had my own journey in rewriting my narrative from high performer to more balanced. So I appreciate as well, like the journey you're on and that you share today with your learnings. Thank you again.
Thank you for having me. This was fantastic.
Thanks for listening to this latest episode of the Rise and Play podcast. I am trying to grow a community of conscious leaders across the industry and beyond. So if you want to join this movement, please share the podcast with other conscious leaders because we have so much more we can learn from each other. Also, please don't forget to follow the show so you don't miss out on future content. Every episode is packed with actionable insights that will help you improve your leadership skills now. And if you are interested in learning more on the topics that we discussed today, you can find more insights on riseandplay.io, and there you will also find my free masterclass on conscious leadership. So, have a great week, and until the next time,